This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Colorado chapter of the Nature Conservancy and TNC chapters throughout the western United States. Guided by science and grounded by decades of collaborative partnerships, the Nature Conservancy has a long-standing legacy of achieving lasting results to create a world where nature and people thrive. On the last Tuesday of every month throughout 2024, Mountain and Prairie will be delving into conversations with a wide range of the Nature Conservancy's leaders, partners, collaborators, and stakeholders, highlighting the myriad of conservation challenges, opportunities, and solutions in the American West and beyond. To learn more about the Nature Conservancy's impactful work in the West and around the world, visit www.nature.org. This is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. My guests today are Rusty Bell and Justin Loyka. Rusty is the director of Gillette College's Office of Economic Transformation, and Justin is the Wyoming Energy Program Director at the Nature Conservancy. Rusty and Justin are working together to find sustainable, economically viable solutions to the energy transition that's currently taking place in and around Gillette, Wyoming. Gillette and Campbell County, Wyoming, have long been leaders in the United States coal production business and have been a foundation of the West economy for decades. But over the past 15 years or so, coal production has decreased by approximately half, which will have far-reaching consequences for Gillette, the state of Wyoming, and the West. But as coal mining scales back, Gillette is uniquely positioned to capitalize on the rise of renewable energy and the many positive economic and environmental ripple effects that it creates. Campbell County's landscape, workforce, infrastructure, transmission capabilities, and wildlife migration patterns offer huge opportunities to be a future hotbed of renewable energy. By transitioning reclaimed coal mines into renewable energy sites, Campbell County will not only be able to fill in the economic gap created by the contraction of the coal business, but will be able to allow Gillette to continue its culture of innovation, hard work, and community pride for decades to come. Rusty was born and raised in Gillette, and Justin's been living and working in Wyoming for almost 15 years. As you'll hear, they formed a partnership based on optimism, creativity, respect, and pragmatism, and they're making great strides to bolster the economic and environmental future of northeastern Wyoming. We talked about a lot in this conversation, including a history of Wyoming's coal mining business, the culture and community pride of Gillette, why Gillette is a perfect place for renewables, cultural and political views on renewables, wildlife considerations, details around coal mine reclamation, ways to build trust and lasting relationships, and much more. Justin and Rusty also share ideas about why they work so well together, and they both offer some great book recommendations and wise parting words. I love this conversation and learned so much, not just about energy production, but also about community pride, pragmatism, problem solving, and respectful, productive relationships. A huge thanks to Rusty and Justin for joining me, and thank you for listening. Rusty and Justin, I'm super excited to be chatting with you all. I was saying before we started recording that I always learn so much in the preparation, and in a way I wish I'd studied in college as hard as I study for for these interviews. Yeah. But I love learning about everything y'all have going on up there, and it really filled in a lot of gaps in my knowledge. And so I've got some pretty basic questions for y'all at the beginning, but I'd like to kind of start by zooming out and talking about some kind of bigger issues and then zoom in tighter on Gillette and some of the specific projects you're working on. But Justin, I was wondering if we could start with you, and I'd love it if you could kind of give us, as brief as you can, it's kind of a broad question, but just an overview of the coal industry in Wyoming, because, as I was preparing for this, I learned a lot about how the coal industry took over in the mid 80s and became, Wyoming became a dominant player in the coal business. And then it peaked maybe 15 years ago or so. And so just to set the stage for people who don't know anything about coal in Wyoming, could you just kind of give us a brief history lesson of that industry?
Yeah, absolutely, Ed. And I'll also make sure that we leave a little spot for Rusty at the end of this, because he's been in it a little bit longer and a little bit closer than me. Although I will say, I have directly worked in the coal industry, so that's probably why you're asking me here. But the coal industry's been around in Wyoming for a really long time. I think greater than 100 years, but I don't know the deep history there too well. But I mean, there's definitely been mines all over Wyoming for a really long time, so it's been important there for a really long time. And but what we want to talk about when in the modern era is that the Clean Air Act essentially created put greater guardrails around the pollutants that could be emitted when burning coal for power. And because Wyoming's coal is low sulfur, it's low impurity, it suddenly created a really big market for Wyoming coal. So a lot of companies and a lot of folks came out to Wyoming and started mining more and more coal to ship all over the country because it made it easier for those companies and those power plants and utilities to meet their EPA regulation goals. And that's been fantastic for Wyoming. The jobs that's created, and Wyoming has done a really good job of creating a tax structure where everybody benefits. So for every ton of coal mined, there's a certain amount of taxes that come out of that go to the state of Wyoming, and have been creating and have been using that for uh, services all across the state of Wyoming. Our roads, our emergency services, the recreational facilities that are
Yep.
created in Gillette and across Wyoming. All these things are supported by this coal revenue. So it's been a great largesse across the state. And then, in the early 2000s, we're seeing natural gas start to eat into coal-fired power. And like you said, it peaked around 2009, but we've started nationally seeing a lot more coal-fired power plants going and being retired because of natural gas competition primarily. And then, more recently, we've seen renewables in the last, 15 years. The prices of what we call renewables, solar and wind energy, has dropped to the point where it's competitive in these places, and so we're seeing a lot more competition in that space that's been driving coal to retirements across the country and reducing the amount of coal that's being mined in Wyoming, and that's why we're here today. That's why we're having this conversation. Rusty, what did I miss?
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Ed, and thanks for the question. Thank you, Justin. So I would just say on the numbers thing, around 2009, 2010, we were producing about 460 million tons of coal annually in Wyoming, and right now, I think in 2023, we're going to be down around 230. So, we really dropped 50% of that over a 15-year stretch, basically. And what happens with that is, like Justin talked about, that's those severance taxes, which the largest benefactor to those severance taxes is the schools. And so schools across Wyoming, due to our Wyoming Constitution, are funded equally. So those schools across the state, when you have that mineral production drop like that, you'll see the same thing in taxes drop. So not having a replacement for that is a big deal. So I think Justin did a really good job of laying that out. We still have 12 operating coal-fired or coal mining companies. We still ship to 25 other states, including other places in Wyoming from the Powder River Basin. And what really is driving that, like Justin said, was that low cost natural gas that you could switch a power plant over to. But also, I think different policies and regulatory things that are happening in those other 25, 26 states that are pushing them into using more renewables and less carbon intensive energy is what drives that market. So those are the only things I would add to that.
That was a great, both of you guys, that was great explanation. And I'd love to zoom in a little bit on Gillette because, I used to live in Wyoming. A lot of Wyoming folks don't really claim that Jackson Hole, if you live in Wyoming, that you're actually, but I drove through Gillette many times, but I never spent much time there. And I was always very interested in it because it just seemed like a very unique place with a very unique culture. And so Rusty, I know that you were born and raised there, and you've been there forever. And so, could you just talk a bit about Gillette and how the coal industry has affected that town specifically, and how it's affecting it now as the coal production is dropping?
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate the ability. I think one of my favorite things when I get to go around the country or be on panels and go around the state is talk about Gillette. And Gillette has an interesting, like you said, it's interesting, it's unique, and I think it's unique. But I also have learned a lot about coal reliant communities around the country, and it really has some similarities, but with those kind of communities. But it was a very small community in the early 70s, just a few thousand people. And like Justin said, the Clean Air Act and those kind of things really sparked that interest in low sulfur, clean coal. And so Gillette grew very fast, and there's not a lot of people that were actually from Gillette, and still to this day, a lot of the roots from Gillette are not here. There's still some long-standing, ranching community, or community people that have been here for a long time in those families, but really a lot of the blue collar workers that came here to work in the mines came from other places like Michigan, like the middle America, the Midwest, and other places. And so Gillette grew really fast. In 1976, there was a gentleman that we all have heard the name. If you haven't met him, Mike Enzi was the mayor of Gillette, and pushed a 1% sales tax on ourselves that would go back to the community, and that would be invested back into the community. And it gets voted on every 4 years, and it's passed every 4 years in Gillette. It's passed in Campbell County every fourth year since 1976. And so Gillette has invested back into itself a lot over the past 40 and 50 years. And I think that's one of the things that people, when they come to Gillette and they see some of the things that we have here that other places of 40 or 50,000 people do not have. One thing that brought that was the fact that we have a great deal of pride in ourselves here, and we want to invest back into ourselves. And if somebody that hasn't spent a lot of time in Gillette, if you could see the things like our recreation center that is unmatched maybe anywhere in the country, I would put it. I mean, it's got a 40-foot climbing Devil's Tower replica in there to climb, and it's got indoor track facilities that a lot of the universities around us come and use for their indoor track meets in the winter. We have an aquatic center that is absolutely amazing. We have, and I think all of Wyoming has good schools, but Campbell County has incredible schools. We have things like the children's developmental services. Most communities don't have things like that. We have incredible infrastructure in and around Gillette. We have the growth ability with the Madison water pipeline for 75 to 80,000 people. We've built a belt loop around the city of Gillette so that it's ready for growth. And so I think a lot of the things that people in the community have done over the past 40 years has really built a community that is a good community for families to grow up in, for people to enjoy, because we're in between the Black Hills and the Bighorns. We kind of, we, just like you said, Ed, you drove through Gillette, but you really didn't spend much time there. Well, we've always been an independent community, and we also take pride in the fact that as Gillette goes and as Campbell County goes, so does the state of Wyoming a lot of times. And so, we drive a lot of that economy and a lot of that revenue for the state of Wyoming, and have for 40 years. And I think we have a lot of pride in that, and the people here, you'll notice, have a lot of pride in who we are, from the sports that we do, but to the energy that we provide, not only Wyoming, but the country. At one point, I think 12 to 15% of all the BTUs in the United States were coming from this county. Wow. I think it's down to around 8 now, but it's still significant for a community of less than 50,000 countywide to produce upwards of 10% of all the nation's BTUs. It's pretty amazing. And so, but our community, with a multi-event center and things that we have, and that we've been able to fund ourselves is pretty spectacular. And I would just throw this out there that a lot of people don't know that Gillette is really the only community, or one of the only mid to larger size communities in Wyoming that doesn't have any state. We don't have any state facilities here. And so it's always been, what, Gillette is taking care of itself and will continue to do that. And the people understand that, and we accept it. So, but we also very prideful community.
I love that community pride. And even though I hadn't spent much time there, when I think about, I used to travel a lot through Wyoming, and Gillette always struck me as the place with the most community pride. In a way, it reminds me of the same level of pride that in Colorado, Pueblo, Colorado has, because it was a big steel town many, many, many years ago. And so you've had this prosperous time that's been built on the energy business, and built on thinking very, very wisely about reinvesting, investing in the community. And it's been driven by all these people that are very, very proud of where they're from. But then, to go back to how you started out, it sounds like the coal business, the production has dropped, it sounds like it's pretty much split in half. And so that is a change, and you guys see that coming and are trying to make some adjustments so that the economics continue to thrive in this area. And I was wondering, Justin or Rusty, who I'll let you guys pick, but I'd love to hear if you could give one more kind of high level educational overview of coal mines and the reclamation process, because I think that's important for people to understand.
So the reclamation process for coal mining in Wyoming is really interesting. They're not structured like mines a lot of other places that people typically have more familiarity with, whether it's like a hole in the ground and an underground mine, or a big open pit mine that you have to reclaim at the end of life of the entire mine. So it's a type of strip mining that's done in Wyoming, and it's done and able to be done this way because you have very thick coal seams. You're talking, 40 to 100 plus feet thick of coal, which is, compared to other regions that have like 4 and 6 foot seams, like it's very large, and they're relatively close to the surface compared to a lot of other mines and other coal seams. And what that allows folks to do is you can you mine a pit, and as you finish mining and take the coal seam out, you move that dirt as you mine behind the active face and reclaim the previous pit. So there's constant reclamation ongoing throughout the life of the mine, which is great because it allows that company to get ahead of their reclamation priorities. And it's like a continual process where you can see the results of reclamation. So the mines actually march across the landscape over the course of years. It's really fascinating to look at and see. And, so the first step is replacing all the dirt that you've moved, all the overburden that you've moved from the active face, and putting it back on the previous one. And so you get that as close to original contour as you can. And then those companies are going to go to their topsoil stockpiles, which before they mine, they take all that topsoil and stockpile it, and they lay it out. And they lay it back to 6 to 18 inches, whatever they decide. I think there's some regulation around that I don't know, but they relay that topsoil down, then they reseed with native grass seeds, and they create some habitat structures out there. And as the mine moves away and those get more mature, you can see the antelope and the elk and the other animals start to reuse this landscape and start to return to these areas. And so while it looks, it's a little bit like a golf course, it looks a little man-made, it's very, very productive landscape, and it's like close to original contour. They maintain the drainages that existed before, and it's really impressive work. Honestly, like it's some of the best reclamation work you're going to see anywhere in the country. And there's a lot of awards and other things that DEQ and these companies have received that will tell you that. It's pretty cool.
This is kind of a very broad question, but from the time that they redistribute that soil and plant the native grasses, to how long does it take? Like if I were just driving down the highway and looked over there, like is that a 10-year process to get it back to the point where antelope are running around out there? Or is it a 5-year or is it a 15? I mean, like what's the general time frame for how long it takes for it to get back to somewhat normal?
Well, I want to let Rusty answer that one, and I also want to talk about one thing after that. So while those landscapes replenish fairly quickly with grasses, they grow pretty quick. The sagebrush that was originally there, sagebrush can take up to 100 years or longer to rebuild.
Yeah.
So sagebrush ecosystems are a little tougher, and that's something that TNC is focused on elsewhere and is working at understanding and increasing our ability to reclaim those areas and rebuild sagebrush ecosystems. But Rusty, what do you think in terms of those timelines? You're there looking at it every
sure.
day, so.
You know, it seems like when you're looking at it every day, it doesn't move very fast. But when you when you come back and you think about, well, gosh, they were half a mile from that 3 years ago. Really, I think what we see is once they put that topsoil back on, and they seed that, it really is fairly quickly. I mean, within a year to 2 years, you're going to start seeing other animals on there because the land is more productive. I mean, it really does come back fast once that topsoil's seeded and you get the right kind of moisture on it. I think the part that takes the longest is, you fill in that hole, and then it takes a little bit of time to get the topsoil put back on there. So I think once they mine an area and then they schedule that for reclamation, it's probably anywhere from, depending on how fast the mine is moving and how much production they have. I think it's probably anywhere from 2 to 5 years. You're going to see that production come back to that area.
Great. And for anybody interested in learning more about the sagebrush sea and sagebrush in general, I did an episode with Matt Cahill from TNC a while back, and we spent an hour 15 minutes talking about nothing but sagebrush. So that's I learned a lot in that one, as I always do. Rusty, back to you for a minute. So we've got this long history of coal, a lot of economic prosperity from coal, these landscapes that have been reclaimed, and both you and Justin see a great opportunity for, conservation and economics with the renewable business. So could you just kind of give us a entry point into why Gillette and the surrounding area is such a great spot for renewables?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that question. And it also couples in with the last question of reclamation. And I'm going to start with the fact that all of these sites, and we have about 12 to 15, say industrial sites, running north and south in Campbell County, from these 12 open pit coal mines, and they have incredible infrastructure. So they have, power lines, transmission lines, substations. They also have incredible water sources, not only commercial wells that are drilled that are upwards of 100 gallons a minute and have multiple wells on each site, but they also have some groundwater that they use for dust suppression, things like that. They also have facilities and roads, rail spurs. Each site has at least one rail spur, and then they have, obviously roads getting in. They have facilities, and so when you look at the fact that you have this infrastructure that right now is part of their reclamation plan. I mean, the reclamation plan that we talked about in the last question is to take and you basically bulldoze all of that stuff into a pit and bury it at the end of the life. And what we think is, and what we've already started to do is to make plans and make preparation on how to reuse that infrastructure. I mean, it doesn't make any sense when we're trying to revitalize or transform an economy to take all of this, critical infrastructure out and then ask for it to be replaced. It just doesn't make sense, and I don't think anybody thinks it makes sense. And it's one of the reasons Justin and I have built the relationship we have, is that we both think that not only should we reuse that, but we shouldn't be building new, tearing up new green spaces when we have this stuff already in place. And so, I think that's why the Powder River Basin is really attractive. Not only that, but we have upwards of a couple 100,000 acres of already reclaimed mine land, just because the mines have moved that much over 40 years, and it makes it a real attractive place when you know that solar is going to take maybe eight acres per megawatt or something like that. Well, we have a lot of electrical infrastructure, but we also have the property to be able to put that kind of production on for renewable. The other thing in the northeastern Wyoming is that we don't have, and Justin will probably talk a little bit about this, but we don't have those migratory game routes that the southwest Wyoming and western Wyoming have. Not that we don't have a lot of animals here, because we do, but we don't have those. It's different. We don't have those large migratory routes that have been tracked, and so it really is in a different sense productive or an attractive place because of that. It's already been industrialized.
Justin, could you expand a bit on the wildlife considerations? I had a few months back, I had Peter Gower from TNC on the podcast, and we talked a bit about some of the challenges of siting, and particularly from a wildlife perspective. Could you share your thoughts and just considerations when trying to figure out good sites for renewable energy?
Definitely. It's great you talked to Peter. He's a close colleague with us in Wyoming, so I'm glad you're getting some perspective. Your listeners are getting some perspective from him. When it comes to Wyoming specifically, as a state, we're an energy state. We're going to welcome all of the above energy sources because that's how the state pays for everything. This is how we afford our lifestyle in the state. So we're going to look at what these industries can bring to the state and how and welcome them to our home. But at the same time, renewable energies, wind and solar, bring some challenges with the amount of landscape that they take up. They're just a very large landscape footprint for the energy generation itself. Like Rusty said, it depends on your latitude. So 8 acres a megawatt is a pretty good guess for solar in Wyoming. And when you look at a map of Wyoming and you're looking at these areas that have been where our landscape is intact or not, one thing you notice is that a great thing about Wyoming is we have all these open landscapes that are intact ecosystems, and that just doesn't exist too many other places in the country and a lot of the world, frankly, these days. But we have these huge open prairies, the sagebrush sea, like you talked with Matt about, and we have these large herds of ungulates. So your pronghorn, your mule deer, your elk and moose, and those animals are able to move across this landscape in ways that they just can't do in many other places. And so we've got some of the longest recorded pronghorn migrations and mule deer migrations in the nation right here in Wyoming. And it's an amazing thing that a lot of people in Wyoming, everybody in Wyoming, deeply values about the landscape and wants to maintain. That's it's one of the main reasons we all live here is those resources and to just go and see these animals and whether you want to hunt or observe or whatever. And when you look at, like Rusty said, when you look at the maps of the state and where these animals are moving, one thing you'll notice is that we've done a lot of industrialization in the Gillette and Campbell County area already. And so if those migrations were there before, they're not present there now. We have large animal populations, but they're not those migration corridors are no longer or aren't in existence in that area. And so if we're going to do new development, we want to focus it on areas where it's not going to impact those migration corridors. And Campbell County is a great example of that. So for a number of different reasons, including like the reclamation by the mines that's already there, the infrastructure that's available, and then because those migration corridors won't be disrupted if you're putting this energy infrastructure that's going to be built somewhere. If you're putting it on these post-mining sites, you're going to be able to avoid those migration corridors that are present elsewhere in the state. And that's not only do we want to work on that to protect those things in Wyoming, but we also want to demonstrate that you can do that so people can scale this and use it as an example for other places across the country.
Yeah, so. That's great. Rusty, another question about the infrastructure for you. And again, this is 101 stuff, but I don't know. So I'm going to ask the question, is there a limit? So you've got all this infrastructure in place. Is there a limit to the amount of power that infrastructure can handle? Like say you were to put up, a solar array or wind turbines or whatever, would the infrastructure need to be expanded to handle that extra capacity?
I'll try to, thanks, Ed, for that question. I'll try to answer it as good as I can. And Justin's probably giggling right now because him and I I feel like are on some sort of fast track to get knowledge about transmission capability and how you expand that. But for the most part, these sites have their own substations and have either 69 or 230 kV lines that run through or close to them. And so as far as power, when you start talking about the transmission capability that they have, it's really good. It's really good. I don't know whether they could they could handle 200 megawatts, but certainly a site like this that would have those kind of that kind of infrastructure, power infrastructure would be it would more easily handle 100 to 200 megawatts. I think upwards of 100 is easy for them to handle. I mean, I think that these sites, any of these sites, if you needed up to 50 to 100 megawatts, they could handle that. If that available power is there, getting it there, what might be a little bit of an issue. But as far as something larger than that, it would be easier to accommodate that at one of these sites than it would a native site.
Sure. Really, another very random, very basic question, but how would you describe a megawatt? Like for somebody like me who doesn't know anything about energy production, what's an analogy or something that would allow me to understand a megawatt?
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at it, and then I'll let Justin answer the hard question. But the way I think about it is because I think households kind of don't think about it in megawatts. I think we think about it a little bit smaller level. But like the city of Gillette on any given day on average would use about 40 megawatts, and the city of Gillette is just say 40,000 people, and so. That kind of puts it into perspective. Most of all the power that Wyoming produces, we ship out. And so, Wyoming produces a certain amount of power, and we use probably less than 10 or 12% of that power that we actually produce. And most of it gets sent out to the rest of the country. So, Justin, can you maybe put into perspective what a megawatt is?
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of, I'm just going to keep it as non-wonky as possible, but as a very generalized number, a megawatt can power about 500 homes. Okay. If you've got a megawatt of power on the grid, that's like what it requires to power 500 homes for a day. And that's I hope that some of our partners who are in the power business aren't rolling their eyes too hard when they hear that. But
they can talk to me. They don't need to contact y'all. They can talk to me. I'll buffer anything.
Perfect.
Okay,
it's a large amount of power.
Okay.
Yeah.
One time I saw this movie and a guy was asking somebody to explain something. He said, "Explain it to me as you would to a small child or a golden retriever." And so y'all explained it perfectly for me. Rusty, I've got another question about just how renewables have been received, or the idea of renewables have been received there in Gillette. Because I would imagine, I'm not from there. I'm not trying to act like I know a lot of people from there, but it seems that coal would be a big part of everyone's identity and a big point of pride. And the renewables are something different. And then also, given the political climate of today, I think in certain circles, it's been politicized in a way that's not very productive. And so I'm curious, in your experience being there on the ground for as long as you have, what are the kind of challenges and opportunities of the idea of renewables? Not any of the specific details or the numbers or anything, but just kind of how they're being received by the local population there.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And you probably know, Ed, I was a county commissioner here for 8 years. And so I have been in that political realm, and this question, you're asking somebody that comes from the reddest county in the reddest state, you know, and when we talk about politics. And so, I think it's kind of a twofold answer, because I do think that, that while we're a very blue collar community, we're educated about power. And so, when you start talking about the reliability and the affordability of some of the power that's produced here, and especially when you talk about mine mouth power, there's a place for it. But I think when you start just talking about how maybe how some of the policies in different administrations have pushed money and investment away from reliable, dispatchable energy like fossil fuel energy provides to renewables. It's that part of it is not popular, I think, here. I know it's not popular to rank and file people in coal communities, and it's not just Gillette. I'm fortunate enough to be able to travel around and talk to folks from Appalachia and Ohio River Valley, and I think it's generally the same from coal communities, is that it's been, that has been pushed from those agendas have been pushed. Now, whether that's good or whether that's bad, I don't want to, say that for each individual person. But where I think that you will find and probably be surprised about is that I do think that people here would tell you there is a place for renewables. There is a place for that in the grid, and it does make sense. And the fact that really what has hurt coal more than renewables was cheap, really affordable natural gas. And so, natural gas has hurt coal more than anything. But I think you're starting to see more rooftop solar here. The fact that Peabody Energy, the largest coal producer in the country, is just made a large announcement on 5.5 gigawatts of solar. And so, I think there's a place for it. It makes sense in certain places. And then where I, in my current position, talk more about it is that if a place like, a company like Peabody or a company like somebody else that has assets on the ground, like electrical infrastructure and property, if they want to make an investment to make their company better by putting solar in place on their property, and why should they not be able to do that? It might not look like, hey, we're all coal, but ultimately, I think we're all of the above energy strategy in Wyoming, and I think that makes sense for companies, and I think people understand that. I think the part that you will find with the just rank and file people in coal country is that they don't like the way administrations change and say, we want to do this, or we don't want you to do this. And I think that's the part that you'll find is not very acceptable.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Justin, on the relationship side of things, you lived in Gillette for a while, and you've been in Wyoming for quite a while, but you're like me. I think you moved there from somewhere else. And so I'm curious, from your perspective, when you're having conversations on the ground with these communities, where this livelihood is, their livelihood has been so tightly tied to coal for so long. How do you go about building trust, building really substantial relationships, and having these conversations that could be emotionally charged? I mean, do you approach it from a economic standpoint, or from an environmental standpoint, or it depends on the audience? I'd love to hear more about just the way that you have come in and been able to establish such trust to start making headway on these things as an outsider.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. And I moved to Wyoming in 2009. I was I think 22 years old. You got here as soon as I could, but yeah, you're right. You're always from somewhere else.
I know with my accent, I can't hide.
Yeah, doesn't matter how many years you put in. You're always from somewhere else. But regardless, I mean, I think that the key, and I do think that having put some time into Wyoming is helpful. Having lived in Gillette, worked in a coal mine, and just living in Wyoming long term is a groundbreaker. Like that at least.
Sure.
I got that going for me. Not coming up from Denver and offering advice on things is always good plan when you want to talk with people in Wyoming about the economy. But I think the key to a lot of what you're saying is just being open and chatting with folks about where they're at, where they're coming from, what their needs are, what's important to them, and not villainizing things. Like, in that last question you were talking with Rusty about the perception of renewables and other energy sources in Wyoming. And the key thing is not to villainize anything, because nobody wants bad things for their community there. If they are, I don't want to talk to them. I want to talk to people who are trying to build their communities and work on and help them. And that's where the vast majority of folks are. And like most people in coal country and in Wyoming are they might perceive renewables as being competitive with their traditional industries, but they also like want economic development. They want economic opportunities for themselves and their families and their kids and their neighbors. And if these other industries offer them, then they're not knee-jerk reaction pushing them away. If they are pushing those industries away, it's because they feel like attacked by people who are promoting them, or they feel like their industries and their way of life is under attack. And it doesn't have to be that way. Wyoming's an energy export state. It's not like we produce enough energy and it's flat. The energy pie nationally, the energy demand nationally and internationally is growing year over year. And when that's growing, like we just need more of these things to be able to supply the energy needs of the world, so we can maintain our way of life in Wyoming. And that whatever industry that is, you want to be there for that, and you want to say, hey, like these are the opportunities that exist in the market, and that's what we're gonna try to attract some of those. And I mean, the important thing on the other hand of that is that groups that are coming in from the outside and offering these opportunities aren't villainizing the way things have been before. Because, I mean, for 50 or 75 years, Wyoming's been producing coal and producing oil and gas that have provided power and economic opportunity, and the economic the power that drives economic opportunities all over the country and world. And there's honor in that. There's pride in that. There should be. And just to have people come in and tell you that that's not okay because of, or that you've done a bad thing because of carbon emissions, like that's just terrible, like messaging. It's a terrible tactic. And so like you got to be honest with people about what the future holds, but you've also got to honor the past and the fact that people have worked really, really hard to build this community and to provide a service for their neighbors and neighboring states and their country. And I think, like, meeting all of those things and being honest about the past and the future is really part and parcel of how to have hard conversations anywhere. So
for everything I've learned about specific conservation initiatives from TNC, I think the main lesson, if anybody were to take like a life lesson from all these interviews I've done with TNC folks, is how to build and maintain and grow really, really solid relationships. And I think at the end of the day, being open, you guys are open, you're honest, you listen more than you talk. I mean, it's just these lessons that I'm glad y'all are using them for good, because and using them to make great impact, because there's a lot of great power in these amazing relationships. And I don't know, I think it's very inspiring to me.
Yeah. I mean, one thing, Ed, that I just want to add to that is like, is exactly what you just said there, but like you don't build resilient and strong conservation solutions if you don't bring the communities that live there with you. Like there's no way to do it without those local communities. And whether you're trying to protect a coral reef or a rainforest somewhere else in the world, or you're trying to build the energy economy of the future, if you try to do that without local community buy-in, you're just going to be unsuccessful. So you have to listen to what communities want and need first before you even try to address these things. So,
yep, I agree completely. Rusty, in one of the articles I read as I was preparing for this, you had this really great explanation about how, renewable energy is obviously would be a great economic driver. It could fill in some of the economic output that has been lost as coal has slowed down a bit. But it's also, I think you described it as the first domino in a long line of dominoes. Could you describe a bit about kind of the ripple effects that could come from this renewable economy?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to. I think there's one thing. There's a couple different things that we can talk about. There's the building of actual production, say a solar field, and that comes with construction jobs, which have an impact. but less of those ongoing maintenance kind of jobs. I think one of the areas that we're really trying to focus on is that using that infrastructure that we have it for that manufacturing of some of those components or that supply chain, whether it's solar panels or the glass, or was something we haven't talked about, maybe not as much renewable, but small micro reactors for nuclear. And so some of those things that we talk about, that really plays well into the blue collar jobs that we have, the training and the workforce that we can train here at our technical education centers at Gillette College. It really plays nicely into those things that we can already do here in northeastern Wyoming, and it allows us over time, and that ripple effect. We are really on a kind of a unknown time frame on our coal transition. We know what has happened in the past 15 years, but knowing what is going to happen in the next 5 to 15 years and trying to be proactive about it is a little bit more unknown. And Justin and I can well know that it is not. These economic development opportunities don't happen fast, and development doesn't happen fast. And so, we have to have a lot of these kind of things kind of in the queue, knowing that some of them take a decade or more, maybe to come to fruition. And so, that unknown time frame for how those dominoes are going to fall, not only on coal production, but how we can adjust those, how we could adjust those potentially outgoing jobs to fill incoming jobs. It's really difficult. And from learning from other coal communities, most of the time doesn't happen, but it does give us an opportunity to try to have some of that proactiveness work out from moving one sector, people from one sector of a community and employment to another sector. It's very tough, but I think there's an opportunity for us to do it more so than there are in other communities that are smaller, say have one coal mine and one power plant, where we are sitting on 12 coal mines and 5 power plants, and we ship coal to 25 states. That time frame for us and that transition is relatively unknown.
And Ed, if I could add a little bit to that, I mean, one of the things that when we talk about the honesty in this place, it's important to be to acknowledge that renewable energy isn't going to solve all these problems. It's not going to be a replacement for as many jobs or as much revenue as coal mining is if this transition towards natural gas and these renewables continues, because it just doesn't provide the same number of jobs and the same amount of revenue as coal mining. It just doesn't. There's no way around that. But what it can do is provide the energy that folks in the market are looking for to power their data centers, their carbon removal facilities, their manufacturing facilities. If you look at where those things are getting built, a lot of those companies are looking for carbon-free power. And this is one way to provide that. And it also happens to have all of the things you need for that in Gillette. So we see it as an enabling condition for a lot of the economic diversification that the state is trying to, and the county are trying to pursue.
Yeah, appreciate that, Justin. Thanks for filling that in. That'd be one of those things that I would have said. I wish I would have said that. So thank you.
Well, that brings me to a question. I had this farther down the list, but I think the you guys as a team is so interesting and inspiring to me, and you guys seem to work together so well, and you complement each other so well. And one thing I'm always curious about how people their operating systems. But then the problem is everybody I have on the podcast is humble. So when I ask them questions, they won't answer them. So I'm going to switch it around. And Justin, I want you to tell me what you've learned or what you admire about Rusty, and then we'll switch it up. But as coming in to Wyoming in 2009, I mean, you've been there quite a while now, but you guys work so closely. What do you admire about Rusty, and what have you learned from him?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the chance, Ed, to talk about Rusty here. But so, I mean, I think the thing that's impressive about Rusty and Gillette as a whole is just how open folks are to trying to make their community as best as it can be. And you just see so much, like, I mean, we've talked about this a number of times, but so much pride in the community and so much, I mean, everyone's proud because they've worked so hard. That's what's really impressive is this community has just worked really hard to create a fantastic town where it's an amazing place to live in the prairie. Like, I mean, you go out there and you're like, why would you start building a town here? Like at first, like, I mean, there's not a lot of landmarks to guess why you would start right there. But then once you like, and this probably has to do with the railroad would be my guess. But I mean, once you dig into like what they've built there, you're like really impressed. And I mean, Rusty has been talking to folks all over the country. He's been, like he said earlier, he's been on a crash course of learning all these different technical things about different industries and trying to bring all these people together. And I think that, the outgoingness, the intelligence to just bring all of these different things together and just the openness to learn about all these different opportunities and be accepting of them and like seeing where the opportunities lie is so impressive for Rusty and that community as a whole. It's just it's a lot of work and it's tough. I mean, I think it's really it's really underappreciated how tough it is for folks and a community like this to adjust to the future. Like you've built your community on a few different industries, but largely on the coal industry. And now you're seeing it decline by 50% in a matter of years, and you're looking down further decline in the future. I mean, that's a hard thing to face and to deal with, and to do it with optimism and progress and like proactively is so impressive. So it's just really impressive.
Yeah, it is. And especially when you hear these horror stories about Appalachia and West Virginia and what, so, the kind of remnants of what used to be thriving communities, in that area of the country. I mean, I think the proactive nature and the optimism and the openness is so inspiring and necessary. All right, Rusty, you get to embarrass Justin now.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, Justin. It is makes me smile, and I appreciate all those nice words you said. But I think that the helpfulness and the helpful nature that Justin has brought, and then has meant a ton. I mean, I think it wasn't typical, and we kind of joke about this, that somebody from coal country seeming to team up with the Nature Conservancy didn't seem like that. It didn't seem like that's where it was going to go. But I think it was just we hit it off right away, and that helpful nature that Justin has, and honestly, that genuine care and wanting to be involved in the energy transition and like a place-based economic disruption that we're having. And he generally is a caring person, and incredibly helpful, and he's a lot more knowledgeable about things than maybe we both go on about. But I think that I always say it's nice to be important, but it's way more important to be nice. I think Justin's both important, but a very nice and genuine person, and his helpful nature has just been something that has been greatly appreciated. And I don't know that a lot of the things that I've been doing over the past couple years, it would have been much, much more difficult without Justin there to help move some of these things forward. So yeah, that really is amazing, that commitment that he has to helping with this effort.
So cool. I mean, there's nothing better than working on hard projects where you have to work very, very hard alongside really, really good people. I mean, I think that's just that's what life's all about in a lot of ways.
Well said,
professional life. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. So Justin, obviously you and the resources of TNC are fully behind all of this work and playing such a large role in it. But I'd love to hear a little bit more specific about TNC's role. I mean, I know I saw a copy of the Wyoming's Energy Transition Plan, which I'll link to in the episode notes for people who want to read it. But can you just maybe dial that in a little bit more for the listeners, how you think about TNC's role and what TNC's goals are in this project, for the next, the foreseeable future, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's slightly innovative work for TNC. I'd say like working directly with the coal community on economic transformation is not the traditional work of an organization that, like was founded doing land protection, working with ag producers, and improving ag practices and how that aligned with conservation. That's definitely the history of the Nature Conservancy, and specifically in Wyoming as well. But I think that there's like broad support in the Nature Conservancy for community-based solutions, like we've already talked about. And I think that when we talk about landscape protection in Wyoming, and we talk about the energy future of Wyoming and the nation, all of those things align with TNC's core goals of, protecting the land and water on which all life depends. That's the mission statement of the Nature Conservancy. And so as far as our role, it's definitely evolving in this space. We're figuring out where we can be helpful and be impactful at the same time. And so, we're trying to help. We're trying to find a way to site a solar farm on the backfill of one of these coal mines, like we've been talking about, because not only do we want to see that happen, but we want to, regardless of the size of the first project, we want to study it and learn what are the challenges, what are the pitfalls that can happen to these projects. And I mean, we're learning just by how hard it is to get the first one done. We're learning things that we're able to pass on to other states and to solar energy developers and mine owners across the country, that we can say, hey, these are the things you're going to run into. This is the challenge. Here's the policy changes we need. Here are the best practices for building these projects and engaging these communities to get something done. And so I think that's where we see a lot of opportunity. And then, the other thing is, we have a lot of resources, so we want to help bootstrap some of these things, whether that's if we're going to own a site where one of these solar fields is built, we're open to that. Although, a lot of folks want to own these sites because you just so happens you can make money doing that. So that might not be a role we need to play. Or whether we're supporting projects that are nascent and are growing through research and things like that. So we're going to put some money where our mouth is on that in the future, whether that's supporting new coal to products projects in the Powder River Basin, or if we're funding research on how ungulates move through solar facilities and how to build them in a way that is less impactful to those ungulates. Those are kind of the roles that we're looking at playing directly, and then also just bringing folks together. So meeting with our local utilities and our and the companies that are looking at coming into the state, and trying to find solutions for everybody on that and how we can be helpful there.
That's great. One more energy related question for you guys. And I'd love to hear both of your perspectives. Rusty, you had just mentioned that it's really hard to know timelines when you're talking about this stuff. I'm going to ask you a timeline specific question, but how does the upcoming administration change affect any of your forecasting or any of your thoughts on any of this? Because it seems that, no matter which way you slice it, the coal business is in decline, but the incoming administration seems to make promises about that may or may not happen. So are you guys adjusting any of your work or any of your plans because of the next 4 years?
Yeah, I would say that mostly what we look at is what the market's doing and where the market's going, and and those things that people are looking to invest in. And I think the one change that may happen, and this comes from knowing maybe a little bit of what's happened over the past year, but also what happened, this administration. I was a commissioner with this administration for 4 years. And so I did, get to engage with their Department of Energy and what they were looking at. And interestingly enough, I think the one thing that we can look at that might be, I don't want to say, save coal, because ultimately I think there's a place for coal, and not knowing that transition time. But there's some high efficiency, coal-fired, generation, cleaner, smaller megawatt units that technology, if that starts to be developed more, it was talked about in the prior Trump administration, and actually Rocky Mountain Power has just, I think, mentioned the 8 Rivers project that they're looking at investing in, but that doesn't require bolt-on carbon capture technology. That you have a system that uses coal to power or to make power, and then you have a clean, pure CO2 stream that can be captured and stored without expensive bolt-on carbon capture technology. So I think that's one of the things that not only could help coal communities all over the country, but the coal industry. And I think that this administration would move those kind of technologies forward faster than certainly the prior administration. So I think that's one thing that is that I look forward to. And then the other thing that I think didn't make a lot of sense that the prior administration did that this administration will hopefully help undo is that the prior administration had put a halt or ceasing to lease any coal past 2041 in the Powder River Basin. I mean, they specifically targeted our area to say we're not going to lease any more coal there after 2041, and that just doesn't help. That doesn't help with relationships. It doesn't help with the markets are doing what the markets are doing. There was no real need to pile on and do that, especially when we are. Our communities, our coal communities, are working with a transformation effort. We're trying to diversify, so that didn't make sense, and hopefully we see that pushed back, because there are some other uses for coal that are non-carbon intensive. So I hope that those kind of things will be reversed and to something that makes more sense. Hope that answered your question.
That answered it perfectly. That was very enlightening. Justin, did we miss anything there? Anything you'd like to add?
Well, I mean, the Nature Conservancy is nonpartisan and our goals are apolitical, so it doesn't change any of those sorts of things, But we will respond to the priorities of an administration, just because that will show you where the resources are for working on things. And it doesn't, one of the things is critical minerals, like geopolitically, there's a need for the United States to start rebuilding these supply chains of critical minerals for our national defense, if nothing else. I mean, and our energy grid and all these things. And that's going to be a priority regardless of the administration. And so that's an area that we can continue to work on in Gillette, things like that. So I don't think it changes too much, because like Rusty said, we're looking at markets here, not really administrations. But there will obviously be new opportunities and others that will slow down based on who has control of the DOE and the government. So
Sure. That's I love hearing that. I mean, I think both of you guys, you're just so pragmatic about it. And I feel like I was complaining to my wife the other day about how it seems that people get so hung up on playing the game of whatever that is, that they lose sight of why are we even playing the game. And I feel like with both of y'all, you just have this vision of a sustainable, healthy, economically prosperous community. And so everything serves that goal. And it just seems like you're not getting hung up on politics. You're not getting hung up on some way that we're supposed to think. You just you've got this goal of a sustainable, healthy community, and you're trying to figure out the best way to get there. And I think it's very important for people to listen and to understand that you can drop the political nonsense and you can really just work very hard with good people to find solutions that are outside the box. So I just really admire it, and I appreciate what y'all are doing. Last question for you, or next to the last question. When I meet people like y'all, I want to be like you. And because I used to be, like I said, I used to be a stockbroker at Merrill Lynch, and I'd read articles about people like you. I'm like, I want to be like those people. And I found the best way or a quick way to do that, or to try to do it, is to ask them what books they've read and what books have been important to them. And they could be about energy or conservation or history, or they could just be a book you read in high school that kind of shaped your perspective on things. So Rusty, I'll start with you. Any books that have been important in your life that you would recommend?
Yeah. So I think, it seems like when you start doing something, you focus on books that are talking about the same thing that you're talking about, or at least allowing you to learn maybe a little bit different thing about the thing that so The Paradox of Plenty, and Governor Dave Friedenthal, he just released this just a couple of years ago, and it really talks about Wyoming's tax structure and how the state's economy has been so dependent on mineral extraction and the fossil fuel industry, and that we actually have been trying to diversify for over 100 years, but it's very difficult because all of the services that everybody in Wyoming love, and the low tax structure that we have really is dependent on that fossil industry. So that's a really enlightening one. I think everybody in Wyoming should actually read that, but that's a good one. And then, I've been doing a lot of leadership things in the last 3 to 10 years. And so one of my favorites, and I have a lot of my employees, I own some other small businesses, and one of my managers at one of the businesses, I gave her the book, You Can't Send a Duck to Eagle School. And I think it's a small book, it's a short book, but it's pretty good, to have a perspective on, just on people and things like that. So those are the two that, really came to mind when you threw that out there.
Those are great. Thank you. Justin, you got any?
Yeah, I got two that I'd mention. It's become really popular the last few years, but I still can't help but mention my favorite book by far, which is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. And it's known as just this brutal vision of like an apocalyptic West, which is true and it's fair, but it's also like deeply beautiful in its appreciation of landscapes and just the West, and has a lot of wisdom in it that may be dark and maybe a harsh understanding, but I do think there's a lot of things to learn by reading that book, and I just think the language is really, really impressive. My friends get tired of having me quote that at them, so it's just my favorite. But the language is just unparalleled, and frankly, and I also read a number of years ago a book by J.B. McKinnon called The Once and Future World. And I went and looked to see, I don't think that one's been recommended on here, and I'm surprised by that, but I was also pleased to have one, because so many of my books that I've read that I thought about, I was like, oh, Ed's already recommended that on there. So, but The Once and Future World is this vision of how to build a wilder world, like a world with more nature, a world that where more nature and humanity can coexist. And it also, it goes through a really deep portrayal of the scale of environmental degradation that humans have affected on the world, and so it's hard to read in a lot of ways, and it's beautiful, and you just, it's awe-inspiring what used to exist and what could exist again. But the message of the book that I took from it was just that we have to choose these things, we have to prioritize and to make it a goal of ours, and the actionableness of that was really, really inspiring to me, and kind of formed a lot of the reasons that I wanted to work for the Nature Conservancy and continue to today. So I think it's a really good book for on point for the list that you have here and for your listeners.
That's a great one. I don't believe anybody's ever recommended that, which is at this point, that's pretty amazing. So we'll have links to those. Well, guys, I was saying that we talked strictly about energy, but we could have talked about hunting. We could have talked about wildland firefighting. We could have talked about climbing. Like, you guys lead these amazingly rich and interesting lives beyond your work. But to wrap it up, I always like to ask people if I missed anything, if you have any parting words of wisdom, any way you'd like to wrap it up. And Justin, maybe we start with you for some final words.
Oh, thanks, Ed. I think we've covered a lot of our work here, and I think it's just important for folks to maintain like a solution-oriented, positive outlook on things, even when they get frustrating. And one of those things is, like, I love that your book list and how you recommend that people continue reading, because I always tell people, I was like, the world looks pretty. There's a lot of folks out there that just want your eyeballs and want to get your attention, and it looks like a pretty harsh world out there if you do that. But if you're careful about the sources of your stuff, and the more you read, the easier it is to choose wisely. I think it's easier to choose wisely when you're reading substantial articles or books or whatever, magazines, whatever the source is. And so just curating your information diet and looking for positive sources of information, like Ed's newsletter, which I'll plug there for you. I think that's a really great lesson and something to try hard at, because it really changes your whole worldview.
I agree with all that. That's very wise. Rusty, anything from you?
Well, I would just say that, I think go back to one of my favorite things I get to do in this position, and is to be able to talk about Wyoming and talk about our community and our area. And I certainly am open to, if anybody, whether you're an investor or whether you're just somebody that's driving through Gillette, if you're like, I want to see that look me up and I will show you some of the things that we have in our community and why it's an amazing place. Somebody asked me, why aren't there more young couples moving to Gillette? It's an amazing place for that. And this was a guy from Southern California. And I said, that's a great question. And we'll start looking at it. So I really loved it to show off the community and talk about what we do in Gillette. And Ed, I so much appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that on your platform. I really appreciate this invitation. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate y'all. Y'all are the ones, I'm just sitting here asking a bunch of crazy questions. Y'all are the ones that are working so hard to solve these problems and to just, really make the world a better place. And I love it. And I don't care what business you're in. There are amazing lessons to be learned from the way y'all are going about this. So I just thank y'all so much for your time, especially during this busy time of the year. And I'll look forward to hopefully getting to hang out in person with you all soon.
Can't wait. Merry Christmas.
That'd be great, Ed. Love to see you up here in Wyoming, show you around some of Wyoming's TNC preserves or maybe in the Powder River Basin and some coal mines. Yeah, it's great to talk with you and Rusty, and hope we make that happen soon.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number one, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number two, you go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number 3, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number 4, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. But thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists with more on the way. So head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.